But she wasn't dead. I mean, that would be pointless moving into a nursing home if she was dead, but she wasn't. She also reportedly once said, "I've only ever had one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it." Probably she was a bit unpleasant, covered in olive oil. In 1965, a notary, what we would call a lawyer, I suppose, in the French city of Arles, made what appeared to be a very good deal on an apartment. Unfortunately, his agreement was with a lady named Jeanne Calment, more about her later. But basically, she owned an apartment above her family's former shop. She lived alone, and at 90 years old, she seemed, statistically speaking, very close to the end of the road. So the notary, André-François Raffray, proposed a viager contract. This is a kind of uniquely French property sale where an elderly homeowner, the seller, receives an upfront lump sum of money, bouquet apparently it's called, and a lifetime monthly income. And now here were the terms. Raffray would pay Jeanne 2,500 francs a month, roughly 380 euros in today's money. That's not adjusted for inflation because my maths is terrible, so you can do it if you want, and maybe let me know in the comments how much that would be these days. And when she died, the apartment would finally belong to Raffray. He would get it. On paper, it looked brilliant. In the mid-1960s, the average French woman lived to her mid-70s, and Jeanne Calment was 90 years old. Raffray assumed he'd just be paying for maybe 4 or 5 years. Quel dommage. So, having made this arrangement, Raffray, the notary, thought he'd be paying Jeanne, a monthly income for maybe 4 or 5 years. It was 1965, so he thought, by 1970, maybe she'd have passed on. She didn't. In fact, she didn't die in the 1970s. She didn't die in the 1980s. In fact, he died before she did. Raffray died in 1995, aged 77. At that point, Jeanne Calment was 120 years old, still very much alive, still legally entitled to her monthly payments, which now had to be continued by Raffray's family, his wife. By the time Jeanne finally did die in 1997, aged 122 years and 164 days, the Raffray family had paid more than twice the apartment's market value, and they never lived in it. Why? Because when she was 110 years old, Calment moved into a nursing home, but she wasn't dead. I mean, that would be pointless moving into a nursing home if she was dead, but she wasn't. So she still had the rights to the property. They couldn't live in it, and when she did eventually die, the property had been empty for over 10 years and was a bit of a mess. The deal is now widely described as the worst real estate transaction in history. I doubt if it is really, but I mean, it's a pretty bad one. Incidentally, when you think of Jeanne Calment's life, she was born in 1875, no cars, not really. A few prototype things, no planes or anything like that, helicopters. By the time she died in 1997, we'd been to the moon. The incredible changes during her lifetime. In history, in the past, during somebody's life, the world wouldn't change that much. Maybe during the Industrial Revolution, there'd be some fairly big changes. But in general, you lived and died, it was pretty much the same. Not for her. And actually, when you think about it, not for people being born now, because with artificial intelligence, who knows what the changes are going to be, but they're going to be very, very big. Anyway, Jeanne Calment lived for 122 years. So what was her secret? This is where the story becomes a bit surreal. Jeanne Calment did not live to 122 on liquidized grass and yoga. Her reported habits included chocolate, up to 1 kilo a week. So for all you chocolate lovers out there, there's hope for you yet. A small glass of port wine with meals, she said. Yeah, I've heard that before. I don't know, small glass with a meal. Yeah, a large bottle. Olive oil, which she used in cooking and rubbed into her skin. Not sure about that. And cigarettes, of course. She began smoking at 21 and continued until she was 117, and then quit, but not actually for health reasons. It was actually because she was so old, she was practically blind and couldn't see to light the cigarettes anymore. This, incidentally, it reminds me of two people. The guy who invented jogging, who died at age 56 while he was jogging, compared to Keith Richards, guitarist with the Rolling Stones, ex-drug addict and consumer of industrial quantities of Jack Daniels, who is at this moment 82 years old and still touring. I rest my case. Jeanne Calment was not bedridden for most of her life, as some elderly people often are. She rode a bicycle until she was nearly 100 years old, took up fencing, not making fences, actual fencing with swords at 85, lived independently until she was 110, remained sharp, sarcastic, and thoroughly unimpressed by journalists. When a reporter asked her at 120 years old how she viewed the future, she replied, very brief. She also reportedly once said, I've only ever had one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it. She once claimed to have met Vincent van Gogh as a teenager and described him unromantically as dirty, badly dressed and unpleasant. I think probably she was a bit unpleasant, covered in olive oil. So I think you can say anyway that Jeanne Calment had what you would call a full life. So in this case, the serious mistake was not hers, but rather the notary, André-François Raffray's, who made three catastrophic assumptions. One, that averages apply to individuals. They don't. Two, that age guarantees predictability. It doesn't. And that the future behaves itself. Always a bad bet.